Welcome back to The Heat. 7 years of war in Syria has left hundreds of thousands of people dead, millions displaced, and much of the country destroyed. And more civilians are at risk with intense fighting in Eastern Ghouta near the capital Damascus and in Afrin near the Turkish border. The United Nations Security Council ceasefire passed on March 3rd failed to stop the violence. Let's get back to our panel right now. And let me start this time with Alexander Nekrassov in London. Alexander, we just heard from Michael O'Hanlon there tell us that the United States doesn't have too many options in Syria. But let's look at the Russian position right now. What kind of leverage does Russia have over Bashar al-Assad? Russia voted at the United Nations for that 30-day ceasefire. President Putin also asked for a 5-hour humanitarian pause. All those ignored. What does that tell us about Russian influence?
Well, I think, nobody has any influence anymore in Syria because the conflict has been allowed to get out of control. And by the way, now that we're discussing how to move forwards, again, my Western colleagues are blaming Assad for everything. He is the guilty party. All the rest are wonderful people, but he is the guilty party. If he goes, everything will be fine. No, it won't. That's the problem they need to understand, because that's the stubborn position that has resulted in this conflict going on and on and on. Now, let me give you some examples of when such similar conflicts worked and sort of helped to resolve the situation. Measures, sorry. Let's look at Northern Ireland. I know it sounds a bit odd that I'm taking Northern Ireland. The reason why Northern Ireland suddenly found a resolution was because the religion was taken out of the politics. Both sides were told, stop trying to hide behind religion. You are political groups, you're fighting for power, stop this. And guess what happened? They found a solution. Now let's go to Chechnya. I was a special advisor of the Security Council of Russia on Chechnya, and I initiated, along with others, of course, the peace process there. Now, what happened? We told these people who hid behind Islam that no, religion will not play a role anymore. You are fighting for power, for money, for influence. And suddenly, the conversation changed, because nobody could hide behind this religion or that religion. No religion in the world, no God in the world wants murder committed in his name. Trust me, that's any religion. And this is why we have to take this out, this religious context out of Syria, and just say, guys, you're fighting for power, for territory, for influence, for money, and so on. Now let's talk business. Let's stop this, suddenly eyes rolling, we are believers, they are non-believers, and so on and so on. We have to take out religion out of this war, and we have to talk pragmatic, practical terms. That helped in Chechnya. That helped in Northern Ireland, because these were supposedly religious contexts. Let's try this here. Okay. Stop blaming only Assad. There are many culprits in this conflict.
All right, let me get the view from Damascus. I'll get to you in a moment, Rasha. Bassam Abu Abdullah, we see the situation right now in Syria. As we've just heard, the United States has few options. Russia doesn't have that much influence on Bashar al-Assad. It's up to the Syrians to resolve this. Is the Syrian government prepared to enter into any kind of power-sharing agreement?
I think just I have heard some comments that everyone is blaming President Assad. President Assad is a president of the Syrian Arab Republic, and I don't think that the West or United States in the place to give us lectures in moral side or in humanitarian side. We could see American in Iraq. I think the bad example is America to give us a lecture in that. But in pragmatic way, I can understand that I can talk. So please leave this story when Nikki Haley is interested in eastern part of Ghouta, while I am, or President Assad is not interested in our citizens. This is a lying. So I am not ready to accept these stories from far away to give us lectures. We are here. This is our country. We are defending our country. America is lying in Iraq, and we know Colin Powell. America was lying in Vietnam when McNamara recognized that they were relying on the American people. So
okay,
please give us lectures. This is first. Secondly...
But we're talking about Syria here.
Okay. Secondly, that the future... The future of Syria, there is now two approaches. The American approaches, which we could see with the Trump administration, and I think the 5 states which they met in Washington, USA, UK, France, and Saudi Arabia and Jordan. And we know that the competition is not acceptable for Syrian people. So if we will leave the question for Syrian people, everything we can decide. How to build the future, where is the interest of all parties.
Right.
If we can find a compromise, okay. But at the end of the day, we will win and we will defeat this terrorism which was made from the Western countries, not from us. We didn't create a terrorism in our country or our state. We know from where they came, who paid the money, and how the ISIS is working. And everything now is clearly, we have thousands of documents about that.
Okay, Rasha, go ahead.
I just want to say that, just back to Mr. Alexander's points about hiding behind religion and all that. Yeah, fair enough. You can bring people back and tell them, okay, stop with all this religion and let's get to the table and talk. But the problem is, very often when people sort of become repatriated back in their own country into Damascus, let's say, from the rebel-held areas, they turn into second-class citizens. They're not always able to rent apartments. They're too afraid to enroll their children in school. If the father is wanted, for example, by the regime because he joined the rebellion or because he's under suspicion or what have you, in the regime prisons, there is still a lot of prisoners of conscience, including thousands of women, and that's very problematic. Children possibly being born in prisons, and none of that is talked about. Sure, I understand what Mr. Bassam is saying. Yes, there is money coming from abroad, and that is unacceptable. I understand all that. Of course, that came later after Assad made so many mistakes and kept escalating and released jihadists from prison and basically opened up the country to a regional and eventually an international conflict. But let's be genuine. You know, to be genuine is to come to the table and say, okay, fine, you know, I do have these prisoners of conscience in prison. Let's talk about them. Right. Let's talk about normalizing things. Let's talk about putting weapons down. And then the real terrorists can be identified, expelled, imprisoned, prosecuted, or whatever. But until a genuine move from the Assad regime happens, it's very difficult.
Rasha, if we look at this crisis right now, we have the civil war, which is taking place in Syria right now. But it's, as our other guests have told us as well, it's a wider conflict. It's a geopolitical conflict in that region. We've got other countries involved as well. We've got Turkey, which is just announced that it's surrounded Afrin.
Yeah.
And is preparing for a ground assault.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's, you know, unfortunately, it just keeps escalating and escalating with time. Regional conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia, shadow war. And I mean, Turkey has been involved for some time, and sure, sometimes they show their faces and they actually surround, like now. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. And it's going to keep escalating. Money keeps coming in, weapons keep coming in.
Okay, let me go to Alexander. Alexander, does Russia have something of an exit strategy from Syria, or is it going to be there for a long, long time?
I don't think anybody has an exit strategy. I think Russia, when it moved in, there was an idea that it can basically spend 6 months there, then come out and, you know, help the government at least to stabilize the situation. Now they understand that they've been sucked in. The worst scenario has happened, and I don't even see how they can leave. They can announce occasionally, yes, we're moving our forces out. They are bound to get back again. That's the situation. That's how it works. Unfortunately, this conflict ran for too long, and it sucked in most of the region there. That's what, by the way, that's what the Russians were saying to the Americans and the British when they invaded Iraq. They said to them, this will be a chain reaction. This will spread to all the countries in the region and even further to Asia and to North Africa, which it did, right? So we are now at a situation when troubleshooters should be called in. No longer all this talk about, oh, let's get together in Geneva, let's get together in Astana, or let's get together in New York. That's gone. That is gone. No way. There will have to be drastic solutions. I think, personally, Syria will have to break up. I'm sorry. I know it's bad. It's a nation. It should be united. But there is no other way out. Because we have allowed this conflict to drag on for too long. And as I said, it's sucked in so many sides, so many other countries, that I don't see any other solution but a very drastic one. And I think a split of Syria is on the cards.
And I'm afraid that's where we're going to have to leave it. We have run out of time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidoo in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.